Hi, good evening. Welcome along to the Transfer Show. Dharmesh Sheth and James Savundra are here to take us through the day's top stories, and there are loads of them. And once again, strikers are dominating the agenda. On the way, we have the very latest on Manchester United's pursuit of Benjamin Sesko. Alexander Isak's future is far from certain, but he was back at Newcastle's training ground today. We'll discuss him. And Darwin Nunez was on the score sheet for Liverpool against Athletic Club this evening, but was it his last goal for the club? So much to get into. Let's start with Benjamin Sesko. Dharmesh, what do we know?
Yeah, I mean, this one looks like it's developing now. There is an expectation at some point in this transfer window he may make that move to the Premier League. Manchester United are expected to make a formal offer to RB Leipzig for their striker Benjamin Sesko. They've been in talks with Leipzig over what they would be prepared to pay in regards to a transfer fee and, of course, that all-important structure as well. We do know that Newcastle United are in ongoing talks over the structure of a deal because they made their first move of the two clubs who are interested in Sesko by putting a formal bid on the table. It was worth in total around 80 million euros, 75 million euros initial payment, 5 million euros in performance-related add-ons, which in sterling is just shy of 70 million pounds. As far as Sesko is concerned, we're told that he is open to both projects, but maybe significantly, one source, and it should be reiterated, it is just one source, has told us that he is leaning towards Manchester United. That's if a deal can be agreed, because all of this can be a moot point if RB Leipzig don't agree a deal with either of these clubs and he ends up staying at RB Leipzig, or it's only one club that RB Leipzig agree a deal with, and then Sesko then will have to make a decision within that framework as well. So United's pursuit of Benjamin Sesko, it is clear they definitely do want the player. I just get the impression that if he was to come, would there be question marks over United's current number 9 in Rasmus Hojlund?
Well, there are question marks already, aren't there?
There have been over the course of this entire summer, but it's been fascinating to see the way Hojlund has responded to these transfer rumours. He said when he was on international duty that he wants to stay and fight for his place, and he reiterated that last week. United beating Bournemouth 4-1. He scored in that game. He said he scored twice, but it only went down as one goal. But he said that he wants to fight for his place, despite the fact it has been a difficult 2 years for him. Let's bear in mind, he's just 22 years of age. Ruben Amorim said that he's really happy with Rasmus Hojlund, but we understand that Manchester United are willing to listen to suitable offers for the striker in this window, because we know that Manchester United do have to make sales if they're to sign a striker. They don't necessarily have to make the sales now to sign a player like Benjamin Sesko, but they will have to at some point this summer to comply with PSR. So those sales must be made before the end of the transfer window. And if United sign Benjamin Sesko, you can understand why there will be issues for Rasmus Hojlund, because United aren't in Europe next season. There's going to be far less game time for Manchester United to field players. And there is potentially some similarities if United do look to sign Sesko in this transfer window compared to what they did 2 years ago with Rasmus Hojlund. You'd argue that Benjamin Sesko is maybe slightly further ahead in his development, having played it in the Champions League. He scored 13 goals last season. And this graphic here compares the two players in the season before they joined Manchester United. If this is the case with Benjamin Sesko, you can see United spent £72 million on a very young player who scored just 9 goals in Serie A for Atlanta the season before he joined Manchester United. Sadly for Rasmus Hojlund, last season he scored 4 Premier League goals in 32 appearances. He's been dealt a very tough hand. Circumstances haven't been kind for him.
So are you saying they have to be careful because they might be making the same mistake?
The argument is, and United in this transfer window have signed 2 proven Premier League players. Bryan Mbeumo scored 20 goals in the Premier League last season. Matheus Cunha scored 15. There was a player there, and there is a player there available for the right price. I know Aston Villa don't want to sell him, but Ollie Watkins is ready-made to come in. But he turns 30 at the end of this year. There is no resale value. If Aston Villa want somewhere between 45 and 60 million pounds, for United, they wouldn't get any money back for Ollie Watkins, but perhaps he could fit in straight away, kickstart what Ruben Amorim is trying to do, give him 2 or 3 years of good service. Whereas with Benjamin Sesko, the potential is clear for everybody to see. Arguably, he's one of the most exciting strikers in Europe, there is a very high ceiling. Perhaps Benjamin Sesko can get to a higher level than Ollie Watkins. But heading into this Premier League season, there's an argument you want someone who's going to hit the ground running. I'm not saying United are potentially making the same mistakes they did 2 years ago, because I think Rasmus Hojlund is going to have a brilliant career. There are really, really encouraging signs. But perhaps it was wrong to sign him 2 years ago as the frontline number 9. Anthony Martial was there as well, but he had a number of injury issues for his time at Manchester United. Rasmus Hojlund was already going to have to carry a huge burden. He's done what he can, but it's not worked out in the Premier League so far for him.
One thing
Is
I would
Sesko
say,
a gamble for Manchester United?
One thing I would say about Rasmus Hojlund, I know there's been so much criticism and scrutiny aimed in his direction, but if you look at when he actually joined, I don't think, as James alluded to there, that United's aim was, right, here you go, you're going to carry the burden of Manchester United's goal-scoring responsibility. But added to that, when he arrived, he was slightly injured. He actually didn't make his debut until early September, so he didn't have a pre-season at all in a new club, in a new country, in a new league, at all. The following summer, right, can we see the best out of Rasmus Hojlund? Because he showed signs in his first season. And he started the second pre-season fantastically well until he got a really bad hamstring injury playing against Arsenal, I think it was, in that pre-season. And he didn't actually start for United or make an appearance for United until mid to late September of last season. So again, he's missed the pre-season. Now, there's a touch of irony now that there's been a lot of talk about whether Rasmus Hojlund has got a future at Manchester United in a pre-season where he has played a full part and he has impressed. James says he's showing encouraging signs. He says he wants to fight for his place. Ruben Amorim has been praising Rasmus Hojlund for his performances and how he's starting to adapt to his system and adapt to the team. And it comes at a time when Manchester United are potentially considering offers for him. So it's a difficult one for the club, but it's a difficult one for Hojlund as well.
Yeah, all that said, are Manchester United looking at possibly starting the season with a completely revamped front line?
Well, it could be the case. You've got Brian and Mbeumo on the right-hand side, Matthias Cunha on the left-hand side, and potentially, there's still a long way to go with this, you've got Benjamin Sesko as the striker and Mbeumo 20 Premier League goals last season, Cunha 15 last season. United in total, across their 38 matches in the Premier League last season, scored 44 goals. Already you're going to get 35 goals from those players if they perform at the level which we know they can. And that has been the main issue for Manchester United over the course of the last 10 years. They've signed players who look like they're going to be absolutely perfect to take Manchester United back to the very top. But the weight of the shirt, change in managers, the hierarchy, internal issues have meant that we've not seen the very best of those players. But United hope by signing Premier League proven players in the form of Mbeumo and Cunha, they can get back to that level. Sesko is largely unproven, but there's a reason why Arsenal looked at signing him in the summer. There's a reason why Newcastle want to sign him now, and why United feel like now is probably the time to sign a new striker. I do really feel for Rasmus Hojlund, if this is the case, that against his wishes, he surplus the requirements at Manchester United, because I really think there is a top player there. He's been dealt a really tough hand coming in at such a young age, having to be United's number 9. But you'd argue at this moment in time, Sesko probably would be an upgrade on Rasmus Hojlund, as encouraging as he's looked in pre-season. And United want to get a player in as soon as they can for the start of this season.
Darmesh, I'm going to ask my question again. Are United taking a gamble on Sesko?
Take a gamble on every transfer. And every transfer, it's got an element of risk to it. Until they actually turn up and play, you could have someone who is tried and trusted in the Premier League and it won't work. You could have someone who hasn't played in the Premier League and suddenly he hits the ground running. It's all going to depend on how they integrate into the squad and how they're going to perform and how they're going to fit into a particular formation that Ruben Amorim is not going to change. So he's going to be selecting players with his recruitment team that fit the system he wants to play. There looks like there's more rhyme and reason behind United's recruitment in this transfer window than there has been in the past. So on that front, it looks a little bit more encouraging that the signings that they're making are more likely to work than what are perceived to have been risks in the past.
I tell you what, this isn't a risk. If Alexander Isak signs for somebody, where are we with his future?
He was pictured at the Newcastle training ground this morning, spent 3 hours inside the training ground. This is the first time that he's been there since he headed to Spain, headed to his old club, Real Sociedad, for a personal training camp. And this comes just over 48 hours since Newcastle rejected a bid of over £100 million from Liverpool. We understand he was in the training ground receiving treatment for a thigh injury. Newcastle do not want to sell him. They value him at £150 million. Eddie Howe and the first team squad, they weren't there today. They're still recovering from an overnight flight back from South Korea. I thought it was fascinating what Eddie Howe had to say before they departed South Korea. He said, "You have to earn the right to train with us. The player has a responsibility here to be part of a team and part of a squad. You have to act in the right way." I wonder if this has anything to do with the fact that Isak told Newcastle last month he wanted to explore his options in this transfer window. Newcastle won't sell Alexander Isak if they don't feel his valuation's met, and crucially, if they don't have a replacement lined up. They take on Aston Villa in their first game of the Premier League season next weekend. Their current only fit striker they have is William Asula, who scored one Premier League goal.
Right, so they need a replacement on board. Will that replacement be Johan Wissa, Darmesh?
This one has been quite an unsavoury episode throughout this transfer window. What we do know is that Brentford are expecting Johan Wissa to be training with them tomorrow. They had a day off yesterday, did the squad, because they had a pre-season friendly over the weekend, which Wissa was not involved in. One source, though, has told Sky Sports News that Wissa has got no intention of playing for Brentford again because he wants to move to Newcastle United. He wants both of these clubs to come together and finalise this move so he can get what he perceives to be a dream transfer to play Champions League football at the age of 28, going on 29. He feels he won't get that opportunity again. Look, earlier on in this transfer window, there seemed to be an insistence that this player was not for sale. However, what we're hearing now is that Brentford may do business on Johan Wissa, provided they can bring in an adequate replacement. They don't want to lose Brian Mbeumo, who's gone to Manchester United, and Johan Wissa in the same transfer window unless they bring in players who are going to be able to adequately replace them. That is not easy given what they did for that club in the last couple of seasons. Brentford are looking at players. Amari Hutchinson is one from Ipswich Town, and they are looking at a number of other strikers. But as far as they are concerned, they don't want to sell Wissa, but you just keep getting the impression now that has this gone too far for Wissa to be able to play for the club again? And if so, then Brentford are going to need to want to get the best possible deal that they can. If that comes from Newcastle United, all well and good. Newcastle get the man they want, Wissa gets the move he wants, and then Brentford, for their whole role in this, will hopefully, for their sake, get the transfer fee that they want to be able to reinvest that, to be able to get that adequate replacement that they'd be after.
But James, if Isak leaves Newcastle and Wissa goes to Newcastle, Newcastle still needs someone else, surely.
You think so, because Callum Wilson left at the end of the season. He had 5 years there, 5 injury-hit years, but for one time he did compete for that number 9 shirt with Alexander Isak. They really are limited in options there right now. You'd have to say that Alexander Isak, having not trained with the first team, even if he stays at Newcastle in this transfer window, there's plenty of time left in this window. You wouldn't think he'd be ready for the start of the season. So there's an argument that Newcastle, if Alexander Isak leaves, needs to sign two strikers. Even if he stays, they probably need to sign at least one, you'd say. And Johan Wissa is one that makes sense when you consider what he's done over the course of the last few seasons at Brentford. They're in a really difficult spot, Newcastle, right now, because there's a huge amount of enthusiasm about being back in the Champions League. They had a number of very lean transfer windows where they had to be very quiet when it came to incomings to fit within PSR. Last summer, they did things they didn't want to do to fit within PSR and avoid breaching Premier League rules. Elliot Anderson, the homegrown talent, they were desperate not to sell him. They let him go. Yankuba Minteh, they were so excited about him playing in a Newcastle shirt. He didn't even play for Newcastle. He went to Brighton in the end, having not featured for the club, having been on loan with Arne Slot at final the season before. So for Newcastle, having had so much enthusiasm about this summer and what they could do with money to spend, so far Anthony Elanga is the only senior player through the door. Very exciting, but it's not quite been the summer they wanted. Aaron Ramsdale there too was potentially a number 2, or could come in as a number 1. But things don't look great right now at Newcastle, despite the fact on paper not a huge amount has changed in terms of that squad.
It must be frustrating. I think Newcastle United fans are frustrated. The club is frustrated because their takeover happened at a time when there are rules prohibiting clubs from spending too much more than what they're bringing in.
Old money protecting itself.
Well, the issue they've got is, we know about the rules. It's a rolling 3-year PSR system whereby you can't make more than £105 million worth of losses. Now, to do that, you need the revenue to go up. Now, Newcastle United will argue, well, some of these other clubs who have found their base and have been able to buy lots of players, they could do that when these rules weren't in place. Now Newcastle United do have these rules in place, arguably the richest club in the world, and they can't spend the money that they would like to. James mentioned that Elanga has come in. Great signing, but they were wanting to bring in, spending in excess of 100 to 200 million pounds in this transfer window, which they can so easily do, but because of the rules, they can't. So what they have to do is do it organically. And that's what they're trying to do. Shirt sponsorship deals, marketing, increase revenue, trying to qualify for the Champions League every season. They are in the Champions League this season, so they will feel the benefit of that. But if they can't continue to bring in the players that they want, to be able to maintain that place in the top 4 or the top 5, then they might drop out of the Champions League in future years, and then that source of revenue is gone. So it's going to be difficult for them to do, but there is a way for them to do it, is to increase that revenue, which historically the other clubs have managed to do. If you look at way before Manchester City and Chelsea and the likes of Manchester United, Arsenal and Liverpool, they went and got their global reach with hundreds of thousands of fans from all over the world. That's why they managed to.
But then the rules changed. But then changed the rule. That's what I mean about old money taking care of itself.
That's Newcastle United. That's the route they have to take at this moment in time while these rules are in place.
Yeah. All right. I'm glad you mentioned Liverpool there, because I posed the question at the top of the programme. Darwin Nunez, you told us earlier he'd scored this evening. Is that going to be his last goal for the club?
Potentially. What's actually fascinating as well, Liverpool have released their team. They're playing at 8 o'clock as well. There's 2 friendlies taking place against Athletic Club. They won the first one 4-1. Darwin Nunez scored within the first few minutes. They've named the team for the second match, and it's very clear looking at this is going to be very close to Liverpool's starting 11 for the start of the season. They take on Crystal Palace on Sunday in the Community Shield, and then Bournemouth live on Sky Sports next Friday. And Hugo Ekitike looks like he's going to be the striker for that first match. Darwin Nunez clearly already is a second choice striker at Liverpool. There's been interest from Italy. We now understand AC Milan have made initial contact with Liverpool around the signing of Darwin Nunez. They're trying to sign him. Contact has now been made between the clubs, yet to make an offer. There are other interested clubs, including Al Hilal from Saudi Arabia. We've been reporting since the start of the window that Nunez's preference would be to move to Spain or Europe rather than move further afield to somewhere like the Saudi Pro League. Al Hilal haven't made a bid yet. They're monitoring the situation. He's still got 3 years left on his contract. And when he signed 2 years ago, it was a deal that could rise to £85 million. Liverpool have done very well over the course of the last 18 months in terms of selling players for very high fees, making profits on players. Darwin Nunez is a player who you'd think more likely than not they're going to make a loss on. If they're trying to sign Alexander Isak in this window as well, I think it shows you where Arne Slot sees Darwin Nunez.
Yeah, it does indeed. All right, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk Chelsea, of course. You can't have a transfer show without talking about Chelsea. They're always doing something. And we know Manchester City want to offload, but we've got news on Ruben Diaz. Surely not. See you in a moment.
Jora Hato will add competition at centre-back and left-back. Now, at the same time, Chelsea agree with UEFA to balance the books and balance their transfer spending this summer. They were fined by UEFA earlier on this summer, as were Aston Villa, and they've agreed to certain financial measures to be in place. They're unable to register new players to play in Europe unless they have a positive transfer balance by the end of the transfer window. So basically, they need to show they've made more money from player sales than they've spent on signing players. And that is why there is a real priority in terms of outgoings in this window as well. There's
a long list as well. I'll quickly run through some of the live ones at the moment with regard to Chelsea. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall. We told you earlier on in the window that Fulham were having a look at him, but it looks like now Everton are in the driving seat, firmly in the driving seat, because Everton have agreed a deal with Chelsea worth £29 million, including performance-related add-ons. We think the initial fee is around £25 million. So that one looks like it's edging closer. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall could be on his way to Everton. And then there's a couple of players who could be going from Chelsea to Burnley. First of all, Armando Broja. He is another player who could be on his way out from Stamford Bridge. Burnley remain in talks with Chelsea over the signing of Armando Broja. There's a broad agreement, we're told, on many aspects of that deal, but discussions are centering right now on the structure of how that fee is going to be paid. There is, though, significantly a willingness from the player, from both clubs, to strike an agreement. And the reason we know that is because personal terms on a 5-year contract, they're not expected to be a problem for Armando Broja. The other player who is much closer to joining Burnley is Leslie Ugachukwu, the midfielder. Now, that deal has been agreed on a permanent basis. We think that he's agreed a 5-year contract in principle with Burnley, and a medical is due in the next 24 to 48 hours. So that one looks like it could be happening sooner rather than later. So 2 players, you'd think Broja and Ogachukwu, on their way to Burnley from Chelsea. A number of other players could be departing Chelsea as well. Mark Guiu, we spoke about him last week, on his way to Sunderland. He was supposed to fly in for a medical over the weekend. That flight got postponed, and we thought, is that deal in danger? Our colleague up in the northeast, Keith Downey, assures us no problem at all. That deal is still set to go ahead, so he should be joining Sunderland. And they're also listening to offers for Raheem Sterling, who of course was on loan at Arsenal last season. Didn't really work out for him. Come back to Chelsea. He's entered the final 2 years of his contract. Simply not in the plans for Enzo Maresca. And another player who's not in the plans for Enzo Maresca is Carney Chukwuemeka. So they're listening to offers for him as well. So you can see, even though we are always talking about Chelsea spending so much money during these transfer windows, they are fantastic, it seems, at selling as well.
Do they have to get rid of all those players?
I mean, financially, it would help. I don't think it's compulsory that they do, but I think it's more for the makeup of the squad. I don't think Enzo Maresca wants to be in a situation where he's got 25 players in a first-team squad and another 20 players who could be in a first-team squad training separately from the first team because he feels that they're not part of the plans. So it's rather get them out, get the money in, but really release the squad space as well so that he can work with the players that he wants to.
Yeah. Ben Chilwell's still there as well on a significant contract as well. At the end of last season, the start of last season, Enzo Maresca was in a situation where you had pretty much 2 squads. You had the so-called bomb squad, and actually players like Trevor Chalobah have ended up coming back into the first team. He's been really impressive what he's done. But Chelsea want to be in a situation whereby they're not having all these players who are no longer in the first team plans but still on the books. So financially, yes, they want to get these players in, but also, as Dharma said, logistically, you don't want to be having that many players. Graham Potter was there at one point and there were players sitting on the dressing room floor because there weren't enough seats. Chelsea aren't quite in that situation, but they do need to balance the books to fit within what UEFA want them to do. And clearly from a PSR point of view, but as Dharma said, they've sold so well. Some of the sales they've made over the course of the last few years means they're in no danger when it comes to any Premier League sanctions.
João Felix, didn't he? He went for nearly 50 million.
Yeah.
They do sell well.
Yeah. Like Chelsea, Manchester City have got more players than perhaps Pep Guardiola wants. But we've got news on one of them.
Ruben Dias, Manchester City are closing on a new deal for him, he's still got 2 years left on his contract, but they're looking to extend his time at the Etihad. You can understand why. He's been a major part of City's success since joining it in 2020 for an initial £62 million, which feels like an absolute steal when you consider what he's done. He won the Premier League title in his first 4 full seasons at the club, a treble winner as well, a Club World Cup winner. But one thing I think is going to be fascinating here, we speak about Chelsea looking to sell players to ensure they don't have a bloated squad. Pep Guardiola said that he'd potentially leave Manchester City if the squad was too big. He said, it's impossible for my soul to leave out so many players from the matchday squad. Well, here are City's current centre-back options at the start of this season. Things may move, but Vitor Reis, it looks like he may potentially depart. John Stones, Ruben Diaz, Abdulkadir Kusanov, Nathan Ake, Manuel Akanji, Josko Vardio. Clearly, a number of those players can play in different areas of the pitch, but you'd think there would have to be a departure there. You would think there would have to be at least 1 or 2 departures there. And Kusanov and Reis only joined it in January. So you're in a really interesting situation there, because I think there will be departures at City, but Ruben Diaz certainly isn't one who's going to be departing anytime soon.
I guess someone like Hayes, who's young, you could put him out on loan and bring him back later.
And potentially Kusanov as well. I don't think you'd sign a player in January to then let him go permanently in the summer, but those look like 2 players that you'd think it may benefit them, because we saw Kusanov start to life in the Premier League. It was quite uncertain. You can understand why at such a young age, coming into the Premier League champions, he found it difficult. John Stones, we wait to see what role he has this season. Clearly he's been injury affected over the course of the last few years, but when it comes to centre-backs, City are pretty well set, aren't they?
Yeah, indeed. Let's talk Heung-min Son, Darmesh. Obviously, he's going to leave Spurs. You've got a bit more, I gather, on him.
A highly emotional news conference, wasn't it? He was in tears, was Heung-min Son. His last competitive game for Tottenham Hotspur, aside of the final Premier League game of the season, that one when they won the Europa League final against Manchester United, first trophy since 2008 for Tottenham Hotspur, and he was captain of that team, of course. And he captained Tottenham Hotspur in what's likely to be his final game for the club. It was a game in his native South Korea against Newcastle United over the weekend. You can see some of the emotional moments here. This is Son with the keeper Vicario there. They love him there. They absolutely love him. And he loves Tottenham Hotspur, so it would have been a real wrench for him to have made this decision going into the final year of his contract. He's actually stayed on in South Korea to complete his expected move to the MLS club LAFC. And we're told today that Spurs will actually receive around £15 million for Heung-min Son to move from Tottenham Hotspur to LAFC. And that move is due to be completed in the coming days, ending a 10-year association with Tottenham Hotspur.
Not just Spurs fans, I think Premier League fans love him, don't they?
Yeah.
It's been incredible what he's done in the Spurs shirt. It'll go down as legendary what him and Harry Kane were able to do together, and he continued that legacy. And whilst last season we didn't see him at his very best, the fact he ends his time at Spurs by ending that long wait for a trophy means that he'll go down as a legend forever. Yeah,
we'll wish him well. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, the boys are going to take you through every single Premier League club. News on your club, they've got it for you. And we're going to take a closer look, a deep dive into Manchester United's plans. That and more to come on the Transfer Show. See you in a bit.
Hi there, welcome back to the Transfer Show. Right now, we're going to take you around all 20 Premier League clubs. Darmesh, where should we start?
Let's start on A and Arsenal, James. Stuttgart in talks with Arsenal over the signing of their midfielder Fabio Vieira.
Aston Villa will look to be busy, having only signed one senior player so far in this transfer window.
PSG target Ilya Zabani started for Bournemouth in their final game of their US tour against West Ham United.
Brentford are expecting Johan Wissa to return to training with the squad tomorrow.
Brighton midfielder Kamari Doyle has joined League One Reading on a season-long loan.
Burnley are looking to be busy. They've agreed a deal with Chelsea for midfielder Leslie Ugachukwu.
Chelsea want to sign both Xavi Simons and Alejandro Garnacho before this monumental transfer window closes.
Crystal Palace are yet to receive any formal offers for Abire Eze, despite interest from Arsenal.
Everton have agreed a deal worth £29 million with Chelsea for midfielder Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall.
Fulham's Rodrigo Muniz is one of the strikers Atlanta are considering this summer. That's according to our colleagues at Sky in Italy.
New signing Lucas Perry could make his Leeds debut against AC Milan this weekend.
Darwin Nunez may have scored for Liverpool this evening, but AC Milan have made initial approach to sign Nunez.
Manchester City are close to agreeing a new contract with their central defender Ruben Dias.
Manchester United are expected to make a formal offer for RB Leipzig striker Benjamin Sesko.
Alexander Isak returned to the Newcastle United training ground today after missing the club's pre-season tour of Singapore and South Korea amid huge speculation about his future at the club.
Nottingham Forest have yet to come back in with a new offer for James McAtee after Manchester City rejected a bid around £25 million for him last week.
Mark Guiu is still expected to join Sunderland on loan from Chelsea until the end of the season.
Spurs legend Heung-min is expected to complete a move to MLS side LAFC after 10 years at Tottenham.
Graham Potter says the club are working hard behind the scenes to add to their squad before the end of the transfer window.
He is there somewhere, Graham Potter. He's working behind the scenes, that's why we can't see him. Wolves winger Gonzalo Guedes is closing in on a move to Real Sociedad.
So, the battle for Benjamin Sesko continues, with Manchester United expected to make a formal offer to RB Leipzig. Well, Newcastle are in ongoing talks over the structure of a deal after they made an official bid worth £69.8 million.
There is still a rawness about Sesko, but you look at his journey. He was at Salzburg and he took a while to get going there, but once he did, he started to score goals. And I do think he's dynamic enough. I do think he's physical enough to deal with the Premier League. And what I like about him is that he's not scared to try things. There was a goal towards the back end of last season that I commentated on against Bayern, where the goalkeeper, Jonas Urbik, was a long way off his line. A lot of players would just lift that ball over the top of the goalkeeper. He went, "No, I'll just hit it with the outside of my boot." And he strikes the ball beautifully. Decision-making sometimes needs a bit of work, but he's 22. So I think clubs are looking at him and thinking he's got a high ceiling. It was interesting, there were a lot of comparisons between Sesko and Gyökeres with Arsenal, because Arsenal have been very interested in him for quite some time and then pivoted to Gyökeres. Gyökeres is probably a win now guy. I think in 2-3 years' time, Sesko, I think, has that higher potential, but I think he can score goals in the short to medium term as well.
Darmesh, for those who weren't with us earlier, just sum up again where we are with Sesko.
Benjamin Sesko, right, Manchester United, we think, are expected to make a formal offer. They've been having talks with RB Leipzig about what they'd be prepared to pay. Now, we do know that Newcastle United have made their move already. They've gone to RB Leipzig and said, we are making a formal bid, €75 million down payment, €5 million in performance-related add-ons. That's just shy of around £70 million. They continue talks with RB Leipzig as well over the structure of that deal. Manchester United have yet to make that formal offer, but we are expecting them to do just that. Once that happens, and once there's an agreement with one or both clubs, then it's going to be up to Sesko himself to decide where he wants to go. We think he is open to both projects, but one source continues to tell us that he's leaning slightly towards Manchester United. That's at this stage. OK,
so he might be going to Manchester United. Remind us for the players who could be on the way out of United.
Well, we know that Marcus Rashford has gone. There are 4 others in Tyrell Malacia, Jadon Sancho, Anthony and Alejandro Garnacho, who Manchester United are listening to offers for. Borussia Dortmund still pushing to sign Jadon Sancho for the second time, but for his third spell at the club. Remember, United actually signed him for £73 million. He went back on loan there the season before last, had a really successful time there at Dortmund. They got to the Champions League final. United ended up making a profit on his wages for the time that he was there. They're interested in getting him back again. Now, there's been no formal bid to United. Dortmund, at this moment in time, just getting the information on the potential conditions of a deal. It's thought United would want a permanent element attached to this deal. They would want a permanent sale, number one. Yeah. If they can't get that, because we know that there's complications related to Jadon Sancho's wages, if it was to be another loan, United would, I think, demand, listen, if you take him on loan, there's got to be an obligation. And this is going to be the price of that obligation. Juventus and Napoli were also interested earlier on in this transfer window. I spoke to Gianluca Di Marzio from Sky Italy earlier on today. He seems to think the interest from Juventus has cooled a little bit for now. There is also interest in Sancho from 2 Saudi clubs. As far as the valuation goes, when Chelsea got him on loan with an obligation last season, there was a £25 million obligation price. I don't think it's going to be that high this time. I think Manchester United will almost be forced to bring that price down to be able to do that deal. As far as Anthony is concerned, he's got his heart set on going back to Real Betis. Real Betis are finding it really hard to do that deal, especially on a permanent deal. But rather like the Sancho deal, if it is to be another loan, then I think United would want that permanent element attached to that deal. Again, there is Saudi interest in Anthony, but at the moment, I think there's a willingness from all parties to try and make the Real Betis deal happen. Not only for Real Betis, but if United can get good money eventually for him, but for the player as well, because it simply hasn't worked out for him at Manchester United. And Alejandro Garnacho, I know we spoke about him briefly earlier with regard to Chelsea, but Manchester United are expecting a formal approach from Chelsea. Chelsea clearly interested. Their priority might be on sales at the moment, but the later we go into this window, I think the interest in Alejandro Garnacho is going to be ramped up.
James, we saw Arsenal do this. They bit the bullet and they got rid of players and didn't actually maybe get their value. Do United have to look down that route?
I think that will be the case. I think sometimes you've got to clear the decks and accept the fact you're not going to get the money that you'd want to. Alejandro Garnacho, earlier on in the year, in January, I think United would probably look around £60 million for him. It seems unlikely they'll get that now because of a number of factors. He's not training the first team. He's not part of the first team plans. He's not in that squad for pre-season. And therefore, your negotiating power is somehow lessened because of that. And that's why they're not going to get that money in terms of pure profit for a player like Alejandro Garnacho. Anthony, they signed for £82 million, despite the fact they signed him 3 years ago. His book value will be much lower, but they'll still make it a huge loss, you'd think, on him. And that does have to be the case, because I know Ruben Amorim said that these players will be reintegrated if their value is not met. I don't think there's any real chance of that happening, because this is a new era at Ineos under Ruben Amorim. They're going to back him. These players will not be featuring for Manchester United this season unless something dramatic happens, something drastic happens over the course of the next few weeks. They will make a huge loss on a player like Jadon Sancho, who's cost them so much money since signing from Borussia Dortmund. But this is the way it's going to have to be. Worth bearing in mind, over the course of the last few years, they have put in quite significant sell-on clauses, a number of the transfers in terms of players that departed. And actually, this summer, they've made quite a significant amount of money on that. Anthony Elanga, a player they sold for around £15 million, went to Newcastle for a huge fee, and they're getting a significant amount of that as well. So I think United are learning their lessons over the course of the last few years. They haven't sold very well, but I think they are starting to learn and act like a club like Chelsea do, who make big money on every single player they sell, it seems to be. Absolutely.
All right, let's take another break. When we come back, we've got news of another young England midfielder on the way to France. We've got the very latest on Everton's pursuit of Tyler Dibbling. That and more to come. See you in a bit. Last part of the transfer show already. Now, if you were with us earlier, we spoke about Chelsea's outgoings. Well, we've got a development. Darmesh.
Yeah, that's right. We were talking about Carney Chukwuemeka, weren't we, earlier, as one of the players that Chelsea may listen and consider offers for. Well, Sky Germany are just saying this afternoon that Borussia Dortmund are in negotiations now with Chelsea over the permanent transfer of Carney Chukwuemeka. He spent last season on loan at Dortmund, and as we mentioned, Chelsea are looking to get some money from him, so maybe they can fund some of their other targets in this transfer window. He's still got 3 years left on his contract at Chelsea, which by Chelsea standards is quite a short amount of time given the length of contracts that they have. But this could be a good move for all parties involved here. Chukwuemeka, who's not going to get a look in at Chelsea, probably get first team football at Borussia Dortmund, and Chelsea will get some money, you would think, for a player that no longer figures in the plans under Enzo Maresca.
I'm glad you brought up contract length, because does that complicate things for Chelsea when they've got these massive 7-8 year contracts?
I think it works both ways, because the way they've done it is incentivised contracts. So we heard that Cole Palmer had signed a really long contract when he joined Chelsea, and then within a year or two of him being at Chelsea, he signed another bumper long contract, but that was to do with the fact that he was being rewarded for his performances. So maybe the contract was extended by one further year, so it was now 34 years long. But in all seriousness, it was because it was reflective of his performances. And so they said, when he joined, you're going to be on this much money now, which is good money. But if you perform and reach these targets, then we will reevaluate and you'll get paid more money, which is what they've done. Yeah. And so that it incentivises the Chelsea players, even if they're on long-term contracts, to get better terms on those contracts. So it can work one of two ways. But they'll always have a contract where when it comes to selling these players, Chelsea will probably still be able to get money because of the length of contract they've got left.
And that's why, for instance, you take a player like Nicholas Jackson, who may want to move in this transfer window. He's still got, I think, 6 or 7 years left in his contract. But because they're on a base salary which is so low compared to what they could potentially get elsewhere, if he's not playing, he'll be on, for football terms, a relatively low contract at that point. So it gives you an incentive to want to move to another club to get a better offer elsewhere. So if you are sitting on the bench and you're going to go elsewhere, you'll get better money. There's no value in these players sitting on their contracts because they simply could get much more money elsewhere.
Gotcha. Let's stay with Chelsea. Kiernan Dewsbury-Hall, is he off?
Yes, it looks like Everton have agreed a deal to sign him. And at the same time, Everton are looking to be really busy in this transfer window because they've had another offer rejected by Southampton for Tyler Dibbling. This is fascinating here because we understand that Southampton want around £45 million. The offer that Everton put in was around £38 million plus £8 million in add-ons, so quite a significant amount in add-ons. You understand that Southampton probably want a little bit more upfront or guaranteed. Just 19 years of age, we saw him start 20 matches in the Premier League last season, so we wait to see whether or not Everton will follow up with another bid. You get the sense David Moyes is a little bit frustrated with how the transfer window has gone so far. A number of players have departed at the end of their contract. Abdoulaye Doucouré departing, that was a big blow as well. They've been turned down by a number of players. He wants to sign 10 in this transfer window. We wait to see if they go back in and try to make Tyler Dibbling one of those 10.
Right, I'm going to throw some names at you, gentlemen. Chuba Akpom, Darmesh.
Right, file this one under hijack. We love a hijack in a transfer window. I'm not sure Birmingham City will share that view. This is some story because Birmingham had agreed a deal with Ajax to sign the striker Chuba Akpom. The deal was a loan with an obligation to buy for £7 million, provided Birmingham got promoted from the Championship to the Premier League. He was due to have a medical at Birmingham today. Former club Middlesbrough, who he was prolific for, and Olympiacos were also keen on Chuba Akpom. Then, today, a late intervention from Ipswich Town, and that put Birmingham in a bit of a precarious position, it has to be said. And they were right to be worried because Ipswich then agreed a deal with Ajax, similar to the terms that Birmingham had agreed with Ajax as well. And in the last hour or so, I was told that Chuba Akpom was travelling to Suffolk for a medical with Ipswich Town. And we can say, all being well, and with a certain degree of certainty, that if that medical goes well, he will become an Ipswich Town player. But I'm not going to say that is 100% given how this deal has gone so far.
Sounds like a gazumping to me. James, Tyler Morton.
He's completed his medical at Lyon ahead of completing a £15 million move from Liverpool. He didn't feature in the Premier League last season. He did feature in the Under-21 European Championships, which England won. He was part of the Euros winning squad. The completion of this deal will take Liverpool's player sales beyond 200 million since Richard Hughes became sporting director. A really big summer in terms of incomings, but a massive summer in terms of outgoings as well at Liverpool.
Darmesh, you've got 30 seconds. Martin Dubravka.
Yeah, he's emerged as the primary target for Burnley after James Trafford left for Manchester City. Talks with Newcastle United understood to be progressing over a permanent deal. Dubravka has entered the final year of his contract at St James's Park, so I think Burnley are pinpointing Dubravka as that player who can come into their goalkeeping department following the departure of Trafford.
29 seconds, magnificent. Darmesh, James, thank you very much. That is the transfer show for today. We are back with all the transfer news, and it's bubbling along nicely. All right, when we come back after the break, though, we're back into Sky Sports News, and we're going to talk cricket. What a series, what a test match, what a player Mohammad Siraj is. That's coming next.